Okay, welcome. This is Jim Howard with Trinity Security Allies, where our ministry is your church's safety. I'm happy that everybody is out tonight. We're going to take a couple of seconds before we get this kicked off. We want to do some housekeeping. If you have questions, please hit the chat button and ask. Wendy is going to be working with us, and she will help out. Sorry for that. Got a little ahead of myself. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Sunday morning, what to look for. And this is just something that I really feel like that we need to be working on more, because we seem to be a little out of sync. And I want to make sure that we kind of straighten things out. On December the 29th, 2019, we had the West Freeway Church of Christ shooting. After the shooting happened, it seemed like there were church safety companies appearing out of nowhere. And friends of mine were contacting me and asked me if I have ever heard of these people. And I would go out and start doing my research just to see who they are. I will say this a couple of times. I am a student. I love to go and study new people who are teaching the right way. When I went out and started doing my research, I found that a lot of these companies were industry security companies seeking an opportunity to get into the church security business. As they say, never let a crisis go to waste. And to me, church safety is not a business. It is a ministry. And I stress that all the time, is that if this person, their main focus is not expanding the kingdom of God while protecting the flock, but they're teaching you police and SWAT tactics on how to stop an active shooter, I would be very leery of these people. They put you in a different type of liability that you could be facing in case something ever happened. And what worries me more than anything else is that we need to make sure that we're protecting the flock and not scaring the flock. Now, back in March, we had Department of Homeland Security come up. They sent out a letter about a possible attacks on churches when we started to reopen. There were no credible threats, but because of the hate-filled speech going around the internet, they felt that churches needed to dust off their safety plans and make sure that they were ready when we went back live. Now, in that, we started talking about the different types of people that are probably going to be coming into your church because of this pandemic. And those are the ones that cannot wait to get back in worship, and social distancing and the different things that the CDC is pushing is probably not going to be in their vocabulary. The second thing that we're talking about is those that come in and start telling people that it was a hoax. There's going to be those that are hurting, lost business or lost loved ones that we need to make sure that we administer to. And then there's going to be the prophets that are going to be coming in and telling you that this is the end of the world. We need to make sure that we are prepared when they come into our church. Now, when we teach about how to protect your church, we teach being proactive and not reactive. I don't think you understand. Active shooter training is reactive. And if we go back and study what happened in West Freeway Church of Christ, they were not proactive. They were reactive. And we need to change that mindset. We need to get into being more and more what to look for on Sunday when people come into your church. Now, we teach threat profiling, which is a Marine Corps training, and also from the book Left to Bang by Patrick Van Horn and Jason Riley. I've said this more than once, especially even tonight. I am a student. In 2017, I came across a document called The 7 Steps to Protect Your Faith Community. I found the document really well written, and it was written by an organization called Kingswood Security Consulting by a guy by the name of Simon Osamoh. So I started doing some webinars with some guys, and when I saw this name pop up, it's just how God works. 2020 now, I get to meet Simon because of a podcast I'm doing with the church safety guys. And when he and I got on the phone and started talking, I realized this is a man of God that is looking at protecting the flock the same way that I am trying to do. So I knew that I had to have him for Sunday morning, what to look for. So I'm going to bring up Simon right now. Now, I'm going to embarrass him. That's the picture I got off the web. But I'm going to bring him up. So, Simon, welcome tonight. I'm really excited about having you on the podcast, the webinar. I, you know, like I said, it's really funny. You and I had started talking, and then I was going through and doing some house cleaning in one of my directories on resources, and I saw this document, and I'm looking at it thinking, why does this sound familiar? And then I saw your name on it. So I was like, okay, God, you have it all planned out. I just got to trust you and let you run the show and just use me as the tool. So I really want you to tell a lot of these people are people that have listened to us, have been to our training, but I want you to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. And you're up in the north in the cold, so I just kind of want to say that too. But
well, the first thing I was going to say, Jim, is I thought you were going to make a joke that my picture doesn't look like anything look like now with my beard and my long arrows. So
leave that alone.
Yeah, and I guess for those that have obviously quickly realised that I live in the Midwest, but I'm not a Midwesterner. Originally from a town called Reading, which is around 40 miles west of London. So I met my American wife in Australia back in 2003, and they say that the rest is history. Whenever you meet a man with a foreign accent in the US, generally it's the wife that's brought them here. So we are with a young Jim and Wendy Howard. That's what me and my wife caught in the eye. But I guess, Jim, my background in the UK is law enforcement. Now, we don't have federal law enforcement in the United Kingdom. We just have law enforcement. So there's various different specialities within the police, and different than here in the US. I actually joined the police when I was 19. I think it was a few months after my 19th birthday. So it's a very young. But Thames Valley Police, my department, has around 4,000 sworn officers and around 3,000 support staff. So, it covers a very large department. And I did everything from being a cop on the street to robberies, to burglaries, to becoming a detective. And I was I say lucky and privileged. Some people might not say that, it might sound a bit crazy, but in my mid-20s, I ended up working on organised crime and terrorism, and was very lucky that I was in the right place at the right time when the liquid terrorism plot was occurring, and did a lot of work with the British security services during that investigation. Fast forward sort of a few years from that, and then when I did emigrate here to the US, I found myself in charge of counterterrorism at Mall of America, which was really everything from working with the Secret Service, the FBI, Homeland Security, TSA, Federal Air Marshals, local law enforcement, even some touch points with the CIA. And overseeing suspicious behavior was my main role. We had the undercover team there that are a team of highly skilled and highly trained individuals that sort of aspired to be in law enforcement. They are patrolling Mall of America looking for suspicious behavior. And so everything sort of seemed to align. And maybe we can talk about how I got into sort of security ministry a bit later, but that's sort of how I ended up here today.
Well, and one of the things that I want to go back several years back, there was DHS, Department of Homeland Security, had put out a warning about the Mall of America or large places like that being targets for terrorism. So what people have to realize is that malls, just like churches, just like any other event that, any other place that you may have, can be listed as a soft target. Malls really at times are exactly that, because you have a lot of people there. A lot of times your security that is there is not armed. And so
Correct.
These are things that, once again, I'm going to go back to this. We need to be proactive instead of reactive, because by the
Absolutely.
time it happens, it's too late. So I have to ask you, you told me this story, and I told you I was going to ask about this. What was your first experience of church safety training?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I should say is, like any person, I'm sort of a lifelong Christian, but there's been times when I've been strong in my faith and disappeared from my faith. And that's another story, Jim. We can do my faith story another time, but, I've always been a believer in faith. And, my position was very senior, and, I used to travel around the country educating either on terrorism, on sort of physical security, best practice. Um, and really, I think this is a story that you're referring to. It was actually one day where I'd gone to Disney to do a presentation in front of a safety conference. There was sort of 300 people there from, industry experts, my peers, and it was all about sort of protecting soft targets and sort of sports places. And it was a great thing. I'd gone to Disney, the family had come, all expenses paid, and there's the high stature that comes with it. And then the following week, a police officer friend asked me and said, hey, I know you're a Christian and you're in charge of the suspicious behavior program. Can you come to my church and educate on safety and security? And I said, well, I've never put the two together, but I'm a Christian. So yeah, sure, I'll come along and do it. And like I would do, and me, Jim, ever the professional, I spent hours, most 3 or 4 hours preparing this presentation to educate the church about, why they're a target, why they're a soft target, and how to identify suspicious behavior. And then when you see it, what action to take. And I walked in there one Wednesday evening, sports coat on. I think it was around 7:30, and I looked around the room, and I hope I'm not going to insult any of your viewers here, but the average age was most probably 80. And you had sort of little Maggie and a lot of these ladies, and sort of the pastor introduced me. And this was a large church, and the pastor introduced me. And I looked around the room, and I paused, and I put my clicker down because I realized that everything I prepared wasn't for this audience. So it does tie into what you were saying in your introduction. And I really said to them, here's 4 things that you need to know about suspicious behavior to keep you safe. And I just spoke for around 45 minutes to an hour. And like I said, the previous week I'd been to Disney, all expenses spared. We'd gone on a ride, and I'd been up in front of my industry, in front of my sort of peers within the industry. But I came away that night feeling so fulfilled in what I was doing. I knew that was why the Lord had brought me to the US. He'd brought me to more of America, and he'd taken to me that church that Wednesday evening was to be his servant and educate everything that I'd learned. Before, I used to think I was doing these things for me. The Lord humbled me on that evening and said, everything I've given you is for this. And since then, that was 2012, 2013, I've then been on this journey to help churches stay safe.
Well, and like I said, that was one of the things that impressed me about you, was that you talked about expanding the kingdom of God. You talked about making sure that people understand that this is what we should be doing. We have to administer to those that are hurting. We have to make sure that we do it the right way, in a Christ-like way. And you brought up an interesting statement there, because you were talking about when you worked at the Mall of America was networking. And that is one of the things that we stress and we try to push, is that local areas need to network together so that they can share information of people that may be panhandling or asking for money, or, just doing things like that in an area that, or if something, Christmas time, we had a lady that was asking for money, and then when churches wouldn't give her any, her son would come in and cause a disturbance. So these were things that we wanted to share. We had a sexual offender who ended up being a predator in the end, but he left our church and went to another church, to where he started up he started seeking little girls and grooming them, while grooming the gatekeeper, the parent, the mother, the single mother. So we know that there's things out here that happened in these. So when I meet a professional like you, I want to network with you, because I don't worry about competition. Christ said himself, if they're not against us, they're for us. So when we're out here working, for the church and working for Christ, we're all working on the same team. So these are things where I like to get people like you and have you come on and give us a different point of view. Now, one of the things that Simon has done here is Simon has given us a couple of books, and it's called Church Suspicious Behavior. And so people that are on tonight, we are going to have a drawing later on. We'll notify you if you win one of these books, and we'll send it out to you. Now, I want to kind of go into the book. One of the things, there are videos along with this, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And I know, go on, sorry, Jim.
Well, I was going to say, where can they find these videos? I mean, this is one of the things that when we send these books, we'd like to also send them where they can find the videos so they can look at it as they're going through it. because there's a lot of good information in these videos also. So it helps along with the book.
Yeah, and so it's interesting I'm doing this because I don't really do too much front of camera stuff, believe it or not, or live stuff. I'm not a real big live fan, believe it or not. But, you know, like I said, I've been doing this for around 8 years. And what I learned, so I think now I work with churches in 14, 15 states, something like that. And I very quickly learned that one, as you said, you know, there's over 330,000 Christian churches in the US. You know, you can't be everywhere. You need to collaborate. And then also that, you know, I'm one person, I can't be everywhere. So what I started to do a few years ago was put a lot of my material onto video. So one thing I would say of being a trainer and a sort of consultant is there is no substitute for live training, but you know, churches have limited budget or no budget, or these are individual people wanting to learn. So what I built is a platform which you can find at worshipsecurity.org, where most of my material is available to download, to purchase, or to subscribe to, which is where that class is.
Okay. So let me go to the book because I read it and I just wanted to ask you, because it, like I said, I found it very interesting in some of the words that you used, because when we talk about what to look for on Sundays, you have to, we teach, like I said, from the Marine Corps and the Left of Bang. And in Left of Bang and the Marine Corps threat profiling or combat profiling, they talk about setting baselines. And baselines, what is normal that we see in church. And if you read like our ebook that we talk about this, we go into what a baseline is. What is your dress? You know, is your dress come as you are, or are you more the traditional churches that we seem, you know, have seen where they're coat and ties and things like that. So when you set up your baseline, then what we do is we look for the anomalies. But I like the way that you put it, and I want you to kind of explain it a little more, is that you called it breaking social boundaries. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you how a lot of it came about, Jim, as well. And like I said, I don't mind embarrassing myself with this, and I was that guy that was the executive, a security executive, and I walked to a church to try and do a presentation, and I realized that my presentation was up here and the audience was down here. And you know that I say, you know, who do you want to be and who do you need to be?
Right.
And you know, in my career post law enforcement, and because of the positions I've held, I still do a lot of consulting with a lot of very high level security companies. And even then, what I found is they pay me a lot of money. I go in the room and I come away thinking, well, that was a waste of time. And my wife says, why? And I say, those guys don't understand it because it's way above their level. You know, there's no disrespect to someone, but they're asking me to train a security officer with skills which I should be teaching someone in federal law enforcement.
Sure.
And the reason why I give that example, Jim, is very similar to what I found in churches, that I would go in and train, and every time I keep drumming down my training, because who are us in churches? We're volunteers, we're IT directors, we are you know, people that work with children, you know, we're nurses, we're just someone that works in a coffee shop. They're everyday people. And some phrases and some terminology and some practices that I used to educate on, I found they just don't work.
Right.
So what I really did was break it down to, you know, there's two tests I always say. You know, my mum in England is 78. What does my 78-year-old mother need to know about this, and how do I get that home to her? My youngest son is 6 years old. How do I get him to understand what he needs to know? And what I found is if you say to people in the church, go looking for suspicious behavior, oh, well, you're asking me to look for someone different than myself, and you ask me to look for the color of their skin, and you know, you get into all this big stigma, and you say that conversation for another day. But what I found is if you go say to someone, can you go looking for the breaking of a social boundary? They understand it, they can contextualize it more, and then they're more willing to sort of be involved and help and support your ministry, because, you know, suspicious behavior is everyone's responsibility. When I worked at Mall of America, everyone had to play their part in unattended items, seeing suspicious activity, whatever it is. So the breaking of a social boundary is just a way of really making sure that anyone can understand what it is they need to go looking for, because generally, after the breaking of a social boundary, there's suspicious behavior associated to it.
Well, you brought up an example. You said that in England, like people don't hold eye contact. You know, that they normally look up, kind of see somebody and then break the eye contact. But somebody that would hold that eye contact, that's breaking a social boundary. I like the way you say it, that we have to, and it is exactly as you said. In fact, that was one of the reasons why we went with the little guy that we went with, is because we're working with people who have jobs that are wearing a coat and tie during the daytime, but at churches, they're the guy, they're the people that in Nehemiah, where he said, you know, I put them by family, posting them by family, and half did the work while the others had the spears, shields, and bows. I mean, it was like, you know, they had this for defense, but it was because that was their lifestyle. And so when we bring in people who are accountants, when we bring in people who are doctors, when we bring in people like you said, anybody, we have to bring it down. We have to break it down to what they understand. When I talk about, you know, using what I use as far as the threat profiling, I make it everyday life, you know,
Yes.
because when I talk about profiling, people get that, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that profiling. We do it every day. You know, I joke around. I have two daughters. If a little boy walks up to the front door and knocks on the door, I'm profiling him right off the bat. You know, I want to know who his parents are. I want to see if he's got his pants pulled up and his underwear is not showing. You know, I want to know if he's got a 401k so he can take care of my daughter and he's got a job. You know, I mean, I want to know these things. So we do this in everyday life. And when we talk about it in the church, when we walk up to a stranger that we've never met before, we're trying to find his level of Christianity, because that's what we're there. And if it's not there, this could possibly be a threat. So we break it down real simple into everyday life things so that people truly understand it.
Yeah, and I'll give you two examples. So the first example that you mentioned is the London Underground in England. Is that, you know, no one looks at anyone when you're on the London Underground. And if they do that, that's a bad sign. You know, so someone, by holding eye contact with you on the London Underground, that is a breaking of a social boundary, which gets me into that state of heightened awareness. That's what we're talking about. And the real life example I'll give you, so this is a true example, happened at my church in 2016. I had, playing soccer, being an Englishman, I've got a love of soccer. I actually tore my Achilles tendon and was in a cast. And then a woman walked in, and then I was in a cast. By the time I could get up on my crutches, I tapped one of our security officers on the shoulder and said, "You need to deal with this incident." And he said, "What incident?" And there was a woman who later we know had mental illness. She was throwing things on the front of the stage. She was shouting and she was screaming. There was an altercation with the pastor, and she was removed away. And like I said, sadly, she had mental illness, but she was sort of taken care of. And people said to me afterwards, "Simon, well, that was amazing. I mean, was that your police training? Was that your time at Mall of America? You know, how did you know this was going to happen?" I said, well, it was obvious. And I said, well, she broke a social boundary. And it had nothing to do with ethnicity, because that doesn't play a part. Nothing to do with the fact that she was a woman, because that didn't play a part. Her appearance didn't play a part. What the woman did was she walked during the service, or we're about to start the music. The pastor had his head down. He was praying before he delivers his sermon. And this woman walked in front of him.
Yes.
She broke the social boundary of the church.
Right.
She stood in front of the pastor. That's why in a crowded room, my attention was drawn to her. And I knew to straight away to tap the security officer on the shoulder and say, I think there's something's going to happen. And it was too late. So these are just the real life examples of, you can tell people to do that. You know, this is where people say, contextualize your norm, look for those breaking of a social boundary. What does it look like in your environment? And everyone can do that. I'm sure everyone right now is thinking, well, yeah, I can remember this incident. That was a breaking of a social boundary. It's like when you go to Cub Food. I don't know if that Cub is in Florida where you are, Jim, but you know, you're in an empty parking lot. You drive in, and then another car comes in and they park next to you. You're like, there's 400 spaces there, and you just park next to me. They break the social boundary. They could have parked anywhere. You know, when you're in an elevator, you're on your own, and then you stop at a floor, and then someone gets in and they stand next to you. Well, they could have stood in the corner. They broke the social boundary.
Right.
That's when I start holding my wallet, checking my watch. Why are they so close to me? So it's telling people to go looking for the breaking of the social boundaries, and you'll know those in your environment because you're naturally contextualizing your norm.
And it's funny because I can talk about a couple of them right now. Our pastor used to sit in a specific location. Well, he still does. Our pastor sits in a specific, but our previous pastor sat in a specific location. And it was kind of like an unwritten rule that nobody ever sat behind him, because when people sat behind him, it made him a little bit nervous. But when we would have people, and of course, he's all the way up front. And when we would have people that would walk in the door and go straight toward him to sit right behind him, we immediately, that was like, uh-oh, what just happened here? And we're immediately sending one of our guys down to sit right close by in case they, like you said, he's praying or doing something like that, and they're tapping him on the shoulder like, I need to talk to you, That's just the things that we see. Those are the things that we see.
And one of the things, Jim, I don't know if you're going to cover this later, so you can stop me if it's another question you've got, but one of the reasons why I use the breaking of a social boundary, and actually I wrote it down when you were talking before, is that, you say to someone, go looking for suspicious behavior, it can have a stigma associated to it. But what I always say to people is that those that are displaying suspicious behavior in a church, those are the very people as Christ followers that we want to help.
Sure.
So when you're hesitant, or you're thinking, am I discriminating against a person? Am I being prejudiced? Is there implicit bias in my mind right now? If you're seeing any type of breaking of a social boundary, suspicious behavior, those are the very people that the Lord is calling us to help. Mental illness, whatever it is. So people have got to get past that stigma.
Yeah. And I talked about that in my training. I call it a little bit something different, but you're absolutely right, because we create these file folders in our minds, especially us that have been in law enforcement. We create these file folders, and sometimes these file folders will come back to haunt us, and it'll be detrimental to what we're thinking. And like I said, I talk about this all the time of a specific situation in the church where, because of my training in the past, in fact, I even brought it up in the book about in the 70s, tattoos meant you had been in the penitentiary, you were a drug dealer, you were a motorcycle gang member, or you in the military, and got your tattoo before you went out on cruise. I mean, those were the things of the 70s. You can't use that anymore. Tattoos are considered body art, and you see it everywhere. So if I were to go back and list that same heuristic, what we call heuristic, if I were to use that same mind process, I'm judging instead of looking for I'm looking at it a completely wrong way instead of trying to, do it the right way. Go ahead.
No, what you can say, and the brains are lazy. We all have this implicit bias, but time and time again, society has shown us that we can't rely on a person's appearance. It's got to be the behavior.
Right.
I can remember from my organised crime times, we'd be working on Barbadian drug lords, and then everyone on the plane is looking for the black guy coming off the plane. Well, the Barbadian drug lords have got Chinese guys to bring their drugs. So the black guys are all being stopped, and then the Chinese mules are walking through because they know everyone's got this implicit bias that the brains are lazy. So, society shows you can't contextualize against a person's ethnicity. It's the behavior that you've got to focus on.
Yep. Okay, so tell me what the Solomon Asch experiment is.
Yeah, so the Solomon Asch experiment, I use that, and I can't remember the year. I know I wrote it down somewhere in my notes. Actually, I think it's 1951. So Solomon Asch, I think he was a Polish American, and it was at Swarthmore College in the 50s. And basically, he did this conformity exercise. And one of the things that he did, he just simply drew 4 lines on a piece of paper. And the lines were various different heights. And what he wanted to see is, due to the circumstances that people were in, could he change their answers? So, and I think one thing I would say is that if you research this experiment, the first couple were all men. So those women out there would say, well, I would never do that. And they might have just cause because it was all guys that were doing it. But he basically took a sample population to one side and said, hey, Jim, there's all these lines. Line D is the tallest line. But when we go back in that classroom with 30 people, I'm going to ask you, what is the biggest line? And rather than saying line D, which is the correct answer, you're going to say line B, which is the shortest. And he took him back in. And then he would ask the sort of the mule, if you like, first, and they would say, and then people would look around and say, well, clearly it's D, but Jim has said B, so then I say B. And then the next person would say B, and the next person would say B. And then when he went to the sort of the sample to the person at the end, it changed how they operated. So depending as to where that sort of person was being asked, depended as to whether the group followed or not. So it's just a basic conformity that in a group setting, people were fearful for being wrong. They were fearful of being embarrassed. So they went with the norm, which was included getting the wrong answer. And the reason why I use that Solomon Asch's experiment is that when we're looking about suspicious behavior and we engage in what we do, what I call conversational interviewing, some people that teach a lot of these Israeli techniques, which I myself, used to teach at Mall of America, were talking about, ask these questions, you're looking for truth. Well, in a church, it's very different. I say, are we looking for grace, or does that person have harmful intent? And you only know that through asking the questions. So a conformity piece of it is that people will act differently in our environment. If someone has got profound sin, and you approach them and they've got suspicious behavior, are they going to tell you that I'm having an affair, that I'm an alcoholic, that my life is in disarray, and by the way, can the church lend me $10? Most probably not, because the environment that they're in is going to change their behavior. So I use that Solomon Asch experiment to remind my students that where we are in a church, people might lie, they might deceive you, the environment might change how they act against you. And it doesn't mean they're a bad person, but it just makes it a bit more difficult for you to work out, are they here seeking grace, or do they have harmful intent? So I don't know if that...
Well, no, it makes a lot of sense, because it's the response that you're going to get. We talk about statement analysis. That's the way that we kind of look at it. And I tell people that you can talk to somebody and within 2 minutes find out whether or not they're telling the truth by just, like you said, first time here. No, I come here all the time. Well, what service do you normally go to? And if I can't say what 3 services there are, like I can't say I come to the 11, we have a 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock and a 5 o'clock. And if I say I come to the 12 o'clock service, this starts to cause me to think a bit here, because this person just answered my question. Yes, I come here all the time, but yet doesn't have the times right as far as when the services are. And how did you hear about us? Well, Bob told me about it. Well, who's Bob? Well, he's one of my best friends. Well, what's Bob's last name? Well, I can't remember his last name. All these different things, they start to lead to where this isn't making sense. And then if you kind of look at them and go, oh, you're talking about Bob, the real tall guy. It's like 6'9". And they go, yeah, that's a Bob. And you know that in your church, you don't have a Bob at 6'9". So you're almost directing the traffic, but you're finding out really quickly that they're having to think of things. I liked it where you said who, what, when, where, and how. I mean, just ask simple questions. It doesn't have to be difficult. How did you hear about us? Where are you coming from? These are easy ones. If people have to stop and think about it, they're trying to think of something that might not be the truth. If they can't just fire off, well, I'm new in this area and I just moved here and I've never heard of your church. I mean, they're really kind of being honest about it. They're not trying to hide anything. But if they sit there and they can't remember why they're even here, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, and one thing I would say, Jim, there is, both you and I, have been former police officers, and we've sat across the table, and you think, okay, this is, the Sherlock Holmes, the game is afoot, Watson. You think, I'm gonna get into this guy and work out, the who, what, where, when, why, how, what's he done. But in a church, I think this is why, I've had so much success, and my program's about, teaching everyone from little Maggie up to that security officer, is that in a church, it's my saying, what do you want to be and who do you need to be? Yeah. And unless your church has employed a police officer to do this for you, the role in a church is Christ-focused, is to find those people that we can help.
Yep.
Your role is to seek out and find those people that are lost.
Right.
And when you find them, help them. And then by doing what I call conversational interviewing, your role is just to say, this doesn't sit right. I don't have a good feeling about this. It's not to there interrogate the person, to
No.
ask question after question. It's
No.
okay, even for me, Jim, with my background, it's okay for me to walk away, call 911, ask someone else, seek advice and say, what do you think? This is what the person's saying. It's not to be a police officer and to interrogate them. Why? What happens then? I went to this church, First Baptist Church. I wasn't made to feel very welcome. I felt cross-examined. That's not our role.
Sure. And yes, we talk about that at length. So, all right, my next question to you is the cries of the non-barking dog. I just found that really interesting. So,
yeah,
as a runner, I kind of understood what you were talking about.
Yeah, and so the cries of a non-barking dog. And so, what I did my detective training in the United Kingdom, and one of the professors was a gentleman called Eric Shepherd, and it was very interesting. He was one of those typical professors, but he wrote a book for police officers as how to get a hand with a criminal, and then he wrote a book for the defense attorneys as to how to get a hand with the police. So yeah. He was a clever guy. But he had this concept, which I remember to this day, and again, it's one of these simple ones, called the cries of a non-barking dog. And so what we're asking people to do is when you're holding conversations with someone who's displaying suspicious behavior, how do you work out, are they here seeking grace or are they here with harmful intent? The only way you find someone's intent is to ask them questions. Now, there's some, again, like I said, when I was at Mall of America, it's based on these Israeli techniques. I'm not saying they don't have a place in security ministry, but we're talking about looking after little old Maggie or an IT director or just someone normal. We've got to tell them very quickly, what can you look out for, which is going to say to you that the person might be lying, be a bit dishonest, being a bit deceitful, whatever it is. So I use the cries of the non-barking dog. And the non-barking dog is that you acknowledge the dog, or you listen out for the dog when the dog doesn't bark. And the example that I give is that I've always been a runner, and I've always lived next door to people that own dogs, and I've never owned a dog. And I like dogs, but not a big fan because they're always chase after you. So, I go running past people's houses, and where the dogs are when you're a runner and you're a dog fan. They come out and chase after you. And this happens so frequently that you actually jumping sidewalks and different pavements just to get away, thinking there's a dog there. But eventually, on that one occasion, you go running and you automatically move to the sidewalk, and then the dog doesn't come. And this has happened to me. And when I stop, I look around and think, where is the dog? And I notice the dog when it wasn't there. And it's like when it's 2:00 in the morning and my neighbor has a dog and they go away for the week and they take their dog with them. And I wake up at 2:00 in the morning because the dog isn't barking. And I wake my wife up and say, hey, Courtney, have the neighbors gone away? And she said, why are you waking me up at 2:00 in the morning to tell me where are the neighbors? But I noticed the dog when the dog was silent. So the non-barking dog is the absence of expected detail. That is the best thing you can say to someone. When you ask someone a question and you expect an answer, hey, Jim, what did you do this morning? What I expect to hear in a church, in an open environment, is, I went to a coffee shop. Me and Wendy went some shopping. We went to the grocery store. We bought some food. I'm going to make a nice risotto tonight. I've got this podcast with Simon later on. That's expected detail. If you're talking to someone, you say, hey, welcome to Westwood Community Church. What brings you here today? Oh, I'm just here looking around. So if they start giving vague answers, well, can I help you find an outreach program or a men's small group? If they start not giving you that detail, that's the non-barking dog. That's when you've got to start saying to yourself, well, why is that person here? Jim, what did you do this morning? Well, I did some stuff. What did you do in the afternoon? I did some more stuff. What did you do in the evening? I got ready for the podcast. That person isn't telling you anything where you're expecting to see detail. So it's a very simple technique that I tell people is look for the non-barking dogs, the absence of expected detail. You're learning there's no short story with me, Jim.
But that's exactly right. I mean, like I said, it's always starting the conversation. How do we start the conversation? We have to teach people how to start these conversations. I talked about we use verbal de-escalation and when we talk about verbal de-escalation, one of the first things that all these safety team guys always say, well, I'm not a conversationist. It's not a conversation. It's just really simple. What brought you here to our church? Or how can I help you? What are you looking for? Just simple, real simple questions. It's just starting a conversation. Hey, I've never seen you here before. Do you come on a different service? And if they start talking to you about, yes, I come at 9:00 and we have a large congregation. Okay, well, I don't know everybody, and they say, I don't know everybody either. But if they avoid those questions, if they change the subject or go someplace else, why did they just do that? What was it that they were trying to do? Of course, to me, you also have to be careful with the guys or the ladies that come in and you say, what brought you here to church? Well, I'm a drug addict and you kind of said it, I'm looking for money and I need God and I know I need God, but I just thought I'd come here just to see if God was here. What is that?
Yeah.
Let's get you in with the right group of people here. Let's get you in with somebody that, and then kind of let a pastor or somebody like that talk to the person. It's like you said, the second opinion. They may come back to us and say, something's not right there. Well, we kind of notice that also, but it's always good to get the second opinion on that.
And one of the things I say, Jim, if you don't mind sharing this, is what I call the Great Clips question. I don't know if you read that in my.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I've been here in the US for 9 years, but I don't know, is Great Clips universal? Do I need to explain what that is?
They're around. Yes. Yeah.
So for those that don't know, Great Clips is one of the first sort of barbers, if you like, or hairdressers that I went to when I moved here to the US. And they've since changed their question. But I use Great Clips as an example because you walk in there and they would say, welcome to Great Clips. What brings you here today? And it's very similar to the question that me and you use is, welcome to Westwood Community Church. What brings you in here today? Pause, wait. It's an open question. Everyone in your ministry can do that.
Yes.
And Great Clips, with the days of online, they've changed it to more of a closed question now. And then we say, did you check in online? And say, no, don't do that because I use you in my training. Keep the open question. But with that open question, what brings you here today from Great Clips? What I say to people is that I'm stood in a barber's and my afro is long like it is now with COVID, and they're saying, what brings you here today? Now, anyone that works in sales will tell you, you want the customer to declare the price. You want the customer to start negotiations. Those people in Great Clips have no shame, and that's how they're trained. There's like a 600-page manual of all this stuff as to ask the customer why they're here. Because why? They want the customer to say, hey, I'm here for a haircut. I can help with that. Welcome. Here you come.
Yeah.
So there's those people that say, well, I'm in a church and you're asking me to say, what brings you here? Why should I ask that? Well, ask that question because it's going to settle you down. Everyone can ask it and it requires an answer. And if it's ministry work, you can help them. If there's pauses, if there's non-barking dogs, if there's just silence, then you've got to start saying, is that person here seeking grace or with harmful intent, or why are they here? I can ask a few more questions or go and get help. So the Great Clips question is another one that I use, is never be afraid to be stood inside that barber's and ask someone, what brings you here today?
What brings you here?
Even though the bells are chiming at the Episcopal Church, you can still ask it.
Sure. I think that's a great question. So we're on the same page. You and I both agree that we need to be more proactive than reactive. We need to stop the threat before it happens. I mean, before, as like what we talk about in the Left to Bang, you're right in the middle of whatever happens here. So Wendy, do we have any questions out there yet?
We do not have any questions. If you want to go to Q&A, if you guys have any questions, about things that you can look for, statement analysis, we're here to help.
Question, Simon, while we're waiting for questions, when we're sitting here, tell people where they can find you, where they can find more about you.
Yes, so the best way to find more information about me is my sort of consulting company here in the Midwest is Kingswood Security, so kingswoodsc.com. Or my online training platform is worshipsecurity.org. And like I said, there is no substitute for the real training, but there's a lot of churches that don't have access to a physical trainer. Most of my programs, all the concepts that I've spoken about are in my online platform. So that's worshipsecurity.org. And then because I'm just a busy person like you, Jim, there's also another project that I have, which is a podcast, which is called Who I Became, which is also on Facebook. And hopefully Wendy can send that information out. So kingswoodsc.com, worshipsecurity.org, or Who I Became on Facebook.
I've been following you on your Who I Became, and I think those are great ways to get out and learn about people. I know Carl Chin was one of the ones that you interviewed. Stephen Williford, I just saw that. That was very, very intense, very emotional. I mean, here's a guy that just kind of wanted to live his life out being a normal guy, and then gets thrown into the spotlight. And you know, you never know when God's going to call you. I mean, that's the thing. And you always have to be prepared. And so that was just a very good interview.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, yeah, and tying that into, I mean, the reason why I started that Who I Became series was that, you know, I mean, Carl Chin, we're lucky enough to become friends with him, and, you know, sort of Jimmy Meeks and Stephen Williford I've got to know over the last few years, but it's always interesting to know their stories, you know, what got them started, how do they become the people that they are today, you know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know one of these days you said you're going to have me on, so.
Yeah, I will, for sure. You're given. But if you don't have any questions, Jim, there's actually something else I wanted to sort of cover about trusting your instincts. I don't know if Wendy has questions.
Well,
actually,
go ahead,
we got a couple things. So Jim Thies wants to know, Simon, when you're going to get a haircut. so while you answer that, I'm going to then move over to the chat box.
Well, as soon as the COVID-19 pandemic is over and I can get to a barber's.
You know, if you come down here in Florida, the barbershops are open. So just to let you know, you know.
Yeah. I mean, this podcast is being captured in time. So I think it's June 2nd, I think, is when my haircut is due to be cut.
So we have Don Kendrick from Harbor Church in Odessa. Simon mentioned a web address for one of his videos. Could he please repeat it? And the other thing, Simon, if you send me all those links, I'll attach that to the follow-up for everybody that registered.
Yeah, so the website is worshipsecurity.org. And maybe Jim can say it with his American accent, but worshipsecurity.org is where the
worshipsecurity.org.
Is it too late for Wendy to do subtitles for this?
And then Paul, I'd like to recruit you both for our church's safety team.
How much does it pay? I don't know. You know.
So and Paul's down in Venice.
Right.
So that's a nice area, Simon.
Yeah.
Just so you know, it's beautiful down there, South Florida. Jeff Page, also down in South Florida. Might not a female being questioned by a male parishioner on some of these questions might feel intimidated as if the male is trying to hit on her, depending on the age, of course.
We try to have the same sex interview people. We stay away from it. I mean, we're very, very serious about this. We had a girl that came into our church that only wanted to tell the pastor about her relationships with men. And when she started to open up and he immediately directed her toward one of our female ministers to let her talk to it. And I'll let you answer how y'all do it up north.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, I don't know if he's joined this podcast. I did send it to him earlier, but you know, my good friend Jim Tice, he's the security director of my church. We joke and say he is the fifth pastor. I mean, you know, 5 isn't the number because we're blessed. We've got a lot of pastors at our church, but I call him the fifth pastor. And the reason why is that what we're talking about in security ministry is really community. You know, talking to people, shaking their hand, knowing the social boundaries. You know, it really is. It's just, if you do the half the ministry, you don't have to be a security guy like me and Jim. Anyone can do this if you have the aptitude and you're really following Christ. So I'm not saying that a man shouldn't approach a woman. She might feel intimidated, but it's the type of personality, the type of person that you are. At our church, like I said, my good friend Jim Tice, I mean, he's exceptional at doing this just because he has that welcoming nature. I've never seen you before. Welcome. What brings you here? What are your interests? And just hold that conversation.
See, one of the problems I have is I have a guy that's on our safety team that is single. And so every attractive female that walks in, he's walking over to him and talking to him. So I have to really watch him when he does those things. So
All
go
right,
ahead, Wendy.
Jim Markowski, do you support greeters with safety team member? Do you support greeter when safety team member requests persons to open up backpack as well as wearing a fanny pack as occurred in Charleston, South Carolina? So this is the backpack issue, fanny pack.
This is one that we talk about all the time. You have to be careful with what you're saying there. So if you force everybody that has a fanny pack to open up their fanny pack, then you have to force everybody that's carrying a purse to open up their purse. If you force everybody to open up their backpack, and we have ways of handling backpacks. One of the things that we tell people, we tell churches that if it's a large backpack, go to the person and tell them that it's a fire hazard. I'll get this right in a minute. Because really, seriously, think about it. If you were to place it in a row, there was a fire, then people would trip over it. We have a place that we can keep it securely if you'll let us take it over. If that person refuses, there's a couple of things that run through my mind. We have a lot of homeless here in Florida. That's their worldly belongings in that backpack. If they grab that backpack and hug it, you know that you're dealing with a person that everything that they own is right in there. Now, if you're going to search the backpacks, are you also going to search the diaper bags? Because it's a slippery slope that we go down. This goes back to what Simon's been talking about. This is what we talk about. Go introduce yourself to this person and talk to this person. Go find out why they have to have that big of a backpack. If you say no backpacks at your church, then you got to say no diaper bags, because they can carry stuff just like a backpack can. In fact, really, to tell you the truth, it's easier probably to get weapons in if I'm carrying a diaper bag, because you're not going to be searching it. You're not going to be looking in it. So, yes, I know the fanny pack. We're talking about Charleston, South Carolina. We understand that. That there's a whole lot of other things that we could have done in that. There were red flags all over the place. Why does a white guy walk into a predominantly black church? These are the questions that we're talking about. Why are you here? I mean, realistically, why are you here? What brings you to our church today? Because if he doesn't say, well, I know that y'all have a Wednesday night prayer group that meets at 6:00, I've got a question here. What brought you here? There were just too many, there are other red flags that we could be looking for instead of trying to get into it where, like I said, if you're not going to do it to everybody, then you're starting to discriminate against people. And I don't think that's what you want to do as far as the church goes. Simon, I'll let you jump in if you want to say something.
Yeah, and just on that, I was looking at my notes because I know I wrote it down somewhere. But Dylan Roof was 21 when he went into that church and killed 9 people. The average age was either 51 or 53. You have to go and research it, but it was one of those. So what I would say to people is that even if you remove the fact that Dylan Roof was a 21-year-old white kid, his age ruled him out of that Bible study. If you are so inclined and want to do it, if you go on YouTube, you can find Dylan Roof's FBI interviews are out there. There's about 7 or 8 hours out there. If you listen to it, there is a damning statement from Dylan Roof, not the fact that he killed 9 people, but he rubs salt in the wounds, because he actually says in his FBI interview, if someone had only asked me, if someone had spoken to me, more than likely they could have talked me out of it. So what Jim's really saying is the gun is not the problem. The backpack is not the problem. The fanny pack is not the problem. It's the person's intent. You only find the intent by asking those questions. If someone wants to walk into your church with an AR, it might not be a social norm to do it, but you shouldn't be fearful of them if they've got no intent to ever use it. You can sit next to someone who's open carrying in a restaurant, in a bar. You're not fearful because you don't believe they're going to use it against you. It's the intent you've got to get to. And that comes through the conversational interview. So you're absolutely right, Jim. It's, even with Dylan Roof, it wasn't the fanny pack that was the problem. It was his intent. And he told people, you could have taught me out of it. That's where he rubbed salt in the wounds for those people in Charleston, South Carolina, the most historic black church in the country, arguably. And no one said to a 21-year-old kid, what brings you here? How can I help you? Is another ministry. If they'd done that, the pastor, the state senator might be alive. And it's easy to play the Monday morning quarterback, but that's the sad reality of it.
Well, and it's just like what happened in West Freeway. This guy had a wig and a fake beard and a jacket. Now it was cold outside, so you kind of got to take the jacket out of it. But they said that he was holding something he had his left hand inside the jacket to where it showed that he was holding something. When we see something like that, just like you were talking about the little old ladies, you see this, you immediately call the police. You don't even have to deal with it. Call the police, get them there. And so, like you said, we don't want to, be the Monday morning quarterback, but we also want to do the after action critique, which is what we do. And we learn from these things. It's just like you talking about watching that video of the shooter in South Carolina. I won't say their names. I'm proud of you that you did, but I won't say their names. But when you talk about those people, if you listen to the interviews, if you listen to what is said afterwards, you start to see the things that if this is how we learn and we train other people, how do you talk to them? What are you doing here?
Yeah, and it's funny, Jim. So, I mentioned I've been doing this for sort of 8 years now, very different background. I walk into a lot of churches and like, why are you here? Well, the Lord called me to help. But, with this conversational interviewing, one of the biggest things you find is that a simple way to do it, and obviously I've got I think it's a 1 hour course just on conversational interviewing, and I can do entire days on this. But in everyday life, when you're talking to Wendy, when I'm talking to Courtney, my wife, or we're talking to friends, we might use closed questions, and they know where we're trying to get to, and they'll answer it anyway. But a bad guy or trying to find intent, closed questions do not help us. It just doesn't work. It just shuts it down. You've got to build rapport. So the best way to do it, and what you mentioned that I said earlier, are the TED questions. Tell me, explain, describe. The 5 WH questions: who, what, where, when, why, how. And the simplest way to practice this is when you're next to the conversation. I mean, I'm a great person to be around at a dinner party. Is just pick on someone when you're at your next dinner party or friend over, and try and hold a conversation just by saying, Jim, tell me what you did this morning. Wait, listen. Jim, I know you mentioned that you do a podcast. Explain to me how that podcast works. Jim, I know that you and Wendy have just decorated your bedroom. Describe to me what it looks like. So you put that tell me, explain, describe, and just practice in the questions, in conversation. And then when you're in this situation, those are the questions that you want to use to someone because there's no wriggle room for them. Tell me, explain, describe, who, what, where, when, why, how. So it's very, it takes years of practice to get to, but anyone can practice these simple techniques. Pick someone at a dinner party and use them as your specimen. Well, that's what I do.
Yeah. And let me say this too. I have found this that, of course, when we talk about Christianity and my belief, I mean, this is my belief that I'm here where I'm supposed to be right now, interviewing you. This is where God has us, doing this. But the other thing too, is I find out that when I go to talk to somebody comes to my attention and I go to talk to them, the Holy Spirit is in this. This isn't just Jim talking about to this person right now. There's the Holy Spirit moving in this. And God does not put you, especially if you're truly trusting Him. I say this over and over and over and over again. God doesn't put you in a situation that He has not trained you for. And really, I can't tell you how many times I've walked up to a person and asked a question that I thought to myself, where did that come from? But it was the perfect question to ask. And the response I got was like, I know more about this person than I thought I would if I was just to say, hey, this is your first time here. It was just the way that it just all fit together. And you ask this question and you're kind of like, wow, I really wasn't thinking that, but that's trusting God. That's trusting Him that He's going to help you in this, because He doesn't put you in a position. He truly does not put you in a position that He hasn't trained you for. So,
yeah, and one of the things I always say, Jim, is that, you're like me. I've been doing this for many years, and I can just turn it on and just do it. It's just second nature. And again, who do you want to be? Who do you need
Yeah.
to be? I would never advise anyone to be like me. It's not what I'd advise them to do, but get to a certain base level where you can do it.
Right.
And I'm all about taking everything down to a base level. And then the
Sure.
first thing I'd always say to people is, are you a Christian? Yes. Do you believe? Yes. Where are you? I'm stood inside a church. So when you're inside a church and you see someone, approach them, do the opening line. Welcome to Westwood Community Church. What brings you here today? If you're struggling for conversations, default back to your faith. What I really like about this church are the men's groups. Would that be of interest to you? What I really like about this church is children's ministry. A close question leading, do you have any children? Yes, no. Find ways to interact. What I really love about this church is our pastor, Joel Johnson. He's exceptional. Have you heard him speak? Use your faith as a way to calm you down. It'll settle your nerves. Then you can start asking those who, what, where, when, why, how questions. Tell me, explain, describe. Do I need to be worried with this person? How can I help minister them? Always default back to your faith. That's always going to settle you down because you know that.
Right. Okay. Wendy, you got something else?
We have 2 more things. Jeff made a comment. If I have a concealed carry and a fanny pack, and what if I have a concealed carry with a fanny pack with a gun? Would I be allowed in your church?
In the state of Florida, you would. Yeah. I mean, the state of Florida has certain rules that, in our laws, there are certain places you cannot carry a weapon, but in the state of Florida, the church is not one of those places. So if it is not a church that specifically has signs outside that say no weapons, you can carry a weapon inside the church. I mean, we know that there are a lot of people inside our church that are carrying. What we do is we ask them, because they're not on the safety team, is if something goes south, please don't pull that weapon, because if the safety team members don't know who you are, you may become a target. So.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, Jim mentioned, I interviewed Stephen Williford a couple of weeks ago. Stephen Williford was a person at Sutherland Springs. It was at home. They had to sort of pursue an armed gunman who had an AR. Stephen Williford is a 35, 40-year NRA instructor.
Right.
Jack Wilson, also in Texas, that took a shot that most men would say, I can't take. Took a headshot. Jack Wilson is also a sort of 30, 40 years firearms instructor. Am I them? No. You've really got to think about what is your skill set, because if it becomes the OK Corral, do you have the skills to actually do what you think that you can do?
Well, and I'm worried that one of these days we're going to have the OK Corral and innocent people are going to get killed and churches are going to swing to the complete opposite end, to where now they're just not going to allow it anywhere. You're going to have, insurance companies that are just going to clamp down and say, do not let anybody to come into your church armed. When those things, because you know how it is, we swing, whichever the way the wind is blowing. And so those are things that scare me more than anything else.
Yeah. And I think, absolutely, if the gentleman asked that question, someone has to be the defender. And society and statistics show there is always someone that steps up to be that defender. What I would just say to anyone that wants to carry a firearm in a church is, do you feel that you have those right skills? When you look at the profile of the people that have done it and been successful, Stephen Williford, strong background, Jack Wilson, strong background. If that isn't you, if you're a guy that carries your firearm once a month and goes to the range once in a blue moon, ask yourself, do you have the right profile to even be in that position? Maybe there's something else that you can do to help if that incident ever occurs.
Well, I mean, we look at the El Paso shooting where the guy went into the Walmart there. They know that there were people in there that were armed. This is not public information. They have interviewed people. I've gotten this information from inside that there were people that were armed, but they didn't feel like they had the capability of going after this shooter inside. So what they did was they protected the people around them, which is exactly what you just said. What is my skill set? If my skill set is to get everybody to get down so that they're out of the way, then let me do that, get everybody down. But if my skill set, like you said, arises to the occasion, then sure, you're going to know that. I'll say this one more time. God's not going to put you into a position that he has not been training you for. It says it. You have trained my hands for battle. Let's not tattoo that on our gun. That looks bad. But if that is your expertise, that's what he's trained you for. That's what he's trained you for. Go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, we have one more from Steve Florkey, and then I got an email question as well on my email. So Steve Florkey, what is the best way to learn these conversational skills? And I think we've kind of covered that since that question came in. But you want to just touch on that just for another second?
You could, I mean, listen to some of the training that we're doing. I mean, we're going to be doing kind of like what Simon is talking about. We like it better face to face, just like what you're talking about. But we do know that we can't do it all the time like that. So we're going to be putting some of these trainings out online. The virus here is caused us to really get involved in the social media aspect of it, and the Zoom and the webinars and things like that. So they're going to be out here, but you can read books on, the verbal judo is one that I've heard out here. Like I said, I was fortunate. I was with the crisis negotiation team in Norfolk, and I was taught by the FBI on words to use, open-ended questions, never just say yes or no questions, because that's not going to get you anywhere. You want to get this person to talk to you. You want to start to try to bring this person down. You want to build a rapport. You want to have active listening. All these different things that we've been taught, these are things that are very important. But there's plenty of books out here that you can, or yeah. His book right here talks about it, So if you're a lucky winner, you can have some of this.
Yeah.
But like I said, he's got videos. We're going to be putting videos out on training. There's going to be a lot of it out here. This is not, if you have the gift of gab, and this is what you should practice on. I like the way that you talk about it at dinner parties. Learn how to be a conversationist at a dinner party, especially among friends, to where you're not going to feel uneasy about talking to somebody how their day went. Hey, just like Simon was saying, I understand you just had 3 bathrooms in your kitchen remodeled. Tell me about it, okay? And from that, listen to them, the active listening that you need to be doing, and ask specific questions on things that they say. I'm from Texas. Well, Texas is a big state. What part of Texas are you from? Drill down, continuously ask these questions, get to know as much as you can. And when you start to see the hesitations, like you're kind of saying, that means that person's trying to think of an answer.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always say, Jim, is, my 4th rule, because, I like my list, because that's what helps me remember stuff as I'm getting older. But my 4th rule is, trust your instinct for things that look out of place. And what I say to that is, the biggest thing that you find in suspicious behavior is that people talk themselves out of it. Oh, it's not that, it's something else. Maybe someone else is going to do that. And Jeff Bauman at the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, he had that. He saw the offenders. It's on his conscience for his life that he didn't act. And what I say, I don't know if Jeff Bauman's a Christian or not, but again, what I say to people is tying this back to your faith. Who created you? Well, our Father above created us. What did he give us? He gave us free will, which sometimes we misappropriate, but we have free will. Who gave us the emotions, the feelings? Well, God did. So trust the instincts that God gave you. Don't talk yourself out of them. If your instinct is telling you something doesn't feel right, remember back to your faith. Who gave you that instinct? God. What's he trying to tell you? I've got to acknowledge it. I've got to do something. Don't talk yourself out of it. It's one of the biggest things you find is people start dismissing, it's this, it's that. Take some type of action. Trust your instinct.
And I'm going to give you a little preview of something I'm working on right now, is because we in the church have gone through this of where, I'm not going to say anything because I might offend them. Okay. When David was the shepherd, 1,220 times it's mentioned the shepherd. Okay. God is our shepherd and the different things like that. But when you talk about the shepherd, he didn't let the wolf or the bear or the lion come into the flock and kind of like talk to him like, hey, if you be good, I'll let you stay with the flock. That's not their mindset. Their mindset is they're coming in to devour. So we, as like you said, have got to start trusting our instincts. And when we feel that this person is a wolf in our group, we've got to get them out of there. We cannot do this. Oh, let me just save him. I can save him. Listen, I work with men all the time, and I tell them, I have 4 simple little rules that I ask them to do. And if they can't do those 4 rules, you know what I do? I look at them and I say, listen, Simon over here wants to work with me right now. Simon wants to meet with me and talk about God. You want my time, but you want to just, you want me to listen to you whine and complain about how miserable your life is, but you don't want to do anything to change it. I love you to death. God's going to put your name on my heart all the time. I'll be praying for you. But until you're ready to do these 4 little things, surrender is one of the biggest ones. I can't help you. And we've got to get away from this mindset that we're going to continuously bring these people in because we keep thinking that we're going to change them. Christ told us we're not going to save everybody. The sower and the seed, he tells us 1 out of 4. The rich young ruler that came to him, Christ didn't look at him and say, he said, sell everything. And when he couldn't and he went away, Christ was sad, but he didn't look at the guy and say, hey, Wednesday night, we're having potluck if you want to come back. We have to start becoming the shepherds of our flocks. We have to be the guardians of the bride of Christ. We've really got to start thinking about these things. And when they don't feel right, you said this is the first thing that I thought about when I met you, is when you said you walked up and was looking at all these people out here, you said, if it doesn't feel right, call 911 right now. And we've got to get into that mindset. When the wolves walk in the door and within the few minutes that we figure out that they're wolves, we've got to start saying, hey, this might not be the place for you right now. You're not in the right place.
And you've got to be that person. And, I have my saying, and I say a lot, who do you want to be? Who do you need to be? And, the first rule of verbal de-escalation, I learned it very early on as a cop. And I'm sure you did, is that, you can't save everyone.
No.
And my role isn't to, my role is to try and be the counselor, but it's not to work out, who did what happened, why are we here? If you walk into a domestic situation, you could be there for 2 weeks trying to work out what happened. You're not going to unpack a 5-year relationship which has led to the husband assaulting the wife, or the wife assaulting the husband in a police call. So you've got to know, as you said, is what is our role is to shepherd. And sometimes you might have to say to people, this isn't the place for you, and who you need to be is just a person who's going to watch, report, and observe. Even me, with my crazy background, I can go to a restaurant and say to my wife and family, it doesn't feel right to me, we're going to leave.
Yeah.
And there's no questions. They get up and leave because they know what I'm doing is going to keep us safe.
Right.
Yeah,
I great stuff. I mean, just really good stuff. Okay, dear, you got somebody else?
We are running way over, so really quick, Simon, I need to make sure I get your link for your book. Secondly, Jeff Page, wouldn't it be nice to know that the church you're going to has a safety team on a site where a visitor would know I don't have to carry because this church is safe? How do we get there? If you guys can give me a quick answer to that one.
Become a member of that church, and usually that church will tell you. I mean, we're not going to advertise that that we don't. I mean, where we talk about safety teams in our church, when you come to our church, when you become a member, there's a thing called behind the scenes, and they take you around. And at that point in time, they tell you we have a safety and a medical team. But I don't. It would concern me if some person walked in and said, "Hey, do you have a safety team?"
Well, I think for the visitor maybe to realize that there's a safety team, and now he feels safe. He doesn't feel like he has to, conceal carry.
Simon, you want to jump on that?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to that is, and we'll get into criminology theories later, but crime is about displacement. And when you have a burglar alarm, I'm not saying that you shouldn't break into my house. I'm saying that I'm a hard target, go to my neighbor. I think when you walk into a church and you see people greeting, there's fist bumps, there's handshakes outside of COVID, and the bad guy, the wolf, sees that there is a protecting flock, they're going to go somewhere else because crime is about displacement. So, I just think by creating that warm and welcome environment where do hold these conversations, most people are going to go somewhere else. Dylan Roof would have gone somewhere else. If there was someone being greeted on the door, the doors get closed as soon as a gunshot's heard, that person's going to go somewhere else because they're going to see that you've got a secure environment.
And I think that in today's world, if you walk into a church and look around, you're going to spot the safety team members. It's not like we're, invisible. But I mean, in our church, we don't wear a sign or anything like that, but we all have headsets on, and I mean, people notice. I know the bad guy notices us. I mean, we've had multiple people that have walked in, seen us, and kind of like, I'm here for one service and then I'm gone and never come back. So
Yeah.
we do know that they do see us. Yeah, and I agree with that. I agree with that person that said that. I think it would be great if I knew when I went to a church that there was a safety team. I mean, that's how we ended up getting up in Illinois. The first time was that a guy walked in and saw the safety team and said, "Where did y'all learn this?" And that's when they told him about us, and he contacted us and invited us up. So, sure,
So,
I'm carrying anywhere though. You know me.
all right. So one last question, guys, and then we got to wrap it up and maybe close out in
Okay.
prayer. For Sam Manning, would it help to borrow a marked police department car and park it near your main entrance?
That's a deterrent for somebody that might walk in and want to rob the place. But as far as where we've had issues with mental health, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's like I said, we had a guy that literally scared everybody inside the church, and we had two deputies standing there watching him, and he could have cared less. So, it is a deterrent to a certain extent. But if you talk to Carl Chin will tell you that the police officers left that day when they got hit. That they were driving off the lot. I mean, down the street when they got hit. It is good for deterrent. I mean, we have officers at ours, and we love it when they're there. But like I said, it just depends on what the situation is.
Yeah, and it comes down to, Jim, as a conversation for another day, but what is the risk and what is the intent? If the risk is a burglary, robbery, the car is going to work. If it's, someone who's mental illness with a deadly force weapon, they're going to walk straight by these cars. So look at what risks are and what's the intent behind those risks.
Well, and let me say this too: putting the parked car out in front, and it's just like, how you drive down a street that has a police car parked in the middle of the street, and after the second or third time, you realize that they've got a dummy sitting in there. Nobody cares anymore. They go flying past the car because they realize what it is. So, like I said, you're still going to have it happen. Shoot. The police officer may be the first one that they shoot because they know he's armed. So anyway, Simon, tell us where we can find you one more time, and then we'll go ahead and close up.
So worshipsecurity.org or kingswoodsc.com, and the Who I Became on Facebook. All
right. I got to run through.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Well, hey, don't go away yet. Don't just run off just yet. But let me go ahead and close up. I've got to go through these. There you are again with that. Yeah, you do get a haircut. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So Trinity Security Allies, you can find us. We do a Facebook Live at 8:00. We're going to try to do it this weekend. We're going to be out of town. But if we have good enough reception, we will be doing it. I'll be doing it on my cell phone. We just give out good information. And like I said, kind of a sneak preview. We're going to start talking about the shepherds in the church, because we really need to start being that person and not being somebody that is running around here carrying guns and different things like that. So that doesn't need to be our main focus. We also have free resources that we put out. We do have a YouTube channel right now that you can go to. You can also find us on godlogicproject.com, where I've done interviews with Kevin Haggerty, and we have some good stuff out there. But we also have Trinity Security Allies, where you can see this and any of the other trainings that we've done and a lot of our Facebook Lives. Let's see. We have our free resources online. We have the putting together a safety team, developing a safety team, carrying weapons in a church, and also what we talked about today, Sunday morning, what to look for. Ways that you can support us. We always are looking for prayer, membership. We are starting a web page that we will have resources on there. It's $125 for a church that they can go out and get our training, or it's $1,200 for the year. Online membership programs start off at $25 a month, but through 5/31/2020, it's only $20 a month. Weekly online training and access to video training libraries, and also free tickets to our safety conference. We do outside training, and we also do love donations, any way you can help us. One of the things that I really push, and I push it all the time, is that if you're going to carry a weapon, you need to have some sort of protection. And we use USCCA. This is a great company. They have a lot of training, a lot of really good training. They put out magazines. I think they're going to e-magazines though, but it still doesn't matter. These are good ways of learning a lot of stuff about different types of guns, different type of ammunition, and plus different type of scenarios that you may run into when you're out walking around during the day. For $22 a month for a little peace of mind, that is not expensive. And then of course, that's the gold, but you have your platinum and you have your elite. These are things that you don't drive without insurance. You don't drive without some protection. You should not be carrying a weapon without some sort of protection. I want to thank you. Just real quick, Lord, watch over our brothers and sisters that came out tonight. Protect them. Lord, it is just so refreshing to see how many people are interested in becoming shepherds for you till you come back home and can take it over. Lord, I look forward to the day when we don't have to think about this anymore. I look forward to the day when you come and you tell us, good job, faithful servant. Lord, this is what we're here for, and just protect these people and open their eyes up and understand that this is all about the expansion of the kingdom of God and protecting the bride at the same time. Thank you so much for coming out. Be safe and be blessed. Take care.
Thank you, Simon, for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for allowing me to be part of it, Jim and Wendy.
I'll give you a call. I'll talk to you in a few minutes, okay? Yeah. Take care, folks. Have a great night.